Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we're going to have a little chat about the Dark Mechanicus, and basically what would be awesome to see if there was a codex for them. So, whether that'll actually happen or not, by the way, I have no idea. This is mostly just a wishful thinking style thing, and I think what it'd be good to do is, first of all, highlight the differences between the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Dark Mechanicus. Now, the Dark Mechanicus came about when the Mechanicum split during the Horus heresy, when Horus declared war against the Emperor. Of course, half the Emperor's sons went and had a massive family feud, which admittedly also killed like billions of people, but family feud sounds better. Horus attempted to get the Mechanicum on side by offering STCs, which I think were from the Eurasian technocracy, and some nonsense from some vaults of somewhere else that I can't remember the name of. It kind of worked. The fabricator general Kelbor Hal sided with Horus, Mars was plunged into a civil war, and then Mars was used as a staging area for the Traitor Legion's assault on Terra. Now, the Dark Mechanicus sprang out of that as the sort of opposing chaos version of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and they are obviously still around many years later. As you can tell, because the Chaos Space Marines and their warbands and legions and armies have not completely fallen into disrepair. Someone's got to do that work. That is the Dark Mechanicus. Someone's got to maintain things like the traitor Titan legions. That is also the Dark Mechanicus. They have a completely different mindset to the Adeptus Mechanicus, and they tend to do things a little more unconventionally, unsurprisingly, since they are in fact a bunch of chaos worshipping nutters. They essentially see chaos undivided as the omnitia, and as such, things like, for example, they actually make an effort to create new technology. Now, of course, that is heavily frowned upon when it comes to the Adeptus Mechanicus. New is bad. Only the things what we currently have are things that should be made, unless you find an STC template, in which case, great. They are also... They take a different approach to materials used as well, let's put it like that. So things like demon engines, that is the realm of the Adeptus Mechanicus, using Chaos Spawn as servitors, that sort of thing. You get the idea. They are the very image of corrupted scientists and engineers, which is one of the things that makes them so interesting and would make them so much fun on the tabletop. And I think they're a faction that are kind of underrepresented, they're underserved. I mean, there's not really anything tabletop-wise that they have. It's a similar thing with the Traitor Guard. So, I mean, the Traitor Guard do exist, unquestionably. There are whole armies that have turned against the Emperor. There are corrupted worlds that have Imperial Guard regiments that have turned to chaos. But we don't really see that much of it on the tabletop. Forge World did have the Renegades and Traitors. I don't know how much of that is still available. I think some of that went into Last Chance to Buy. But much like the Dark Mechanicus, they are a thing that exists and in significant numbers, and yet does not really have a presence on the tabletop. The Dark Mechanicus especially would be interesting to see on the tabletop for multiple reasons, really. They are very different to their loyalist counterparts. You know, they have a completely different approach to the technology that they use, to the way that they do things. The heavy use of demons to create new engines and weapons of war is a vast contrast to the way that the Adeptus Mechanicus works. The fact that there is such a crossover between technology and biological as well. There is I think it's fair to say, a heavier emphasis on that for the Dark Mechanicus. I mean, things like the I can never pronounce this. What I'll do is I'll just put it on the screen, maybe. Collabula. I can't remember how to pronounce it. The thing that allows you to make Chaos Space Marines nice and quickly. Also one of the most horrendous inventions in 40k. You should go and read up on it. I'll put a link to a wiki or something in the description so you can read up on it. It's pretty dreadful. But that kind of approach is so different than anything that the Adeptus Mechanicus does. The Adeptus Mechanicus are cold, unquestionably so. They treat the technological and the mechanical far better than they treat the biological, because they believe there is purity in that. The Dark Mechanicus do not have that same sense, I don't think. It's much more a case of... It's more the mad scientist route, which is one of the things that, in a way, actually makes Belisarius' Call quite interesting, because he is kind of going down the mad scientist route. As far as you know, he hasn't thrown demons into tanks in order to make them work or anything, but you never know what might happen in the future. So the Dark Mechanicus, when it comes to technology and when it comes to just things like appearance, have a much... they're much further removed from the Adeptus Mechanicus. A lot of their stuff is a lot more dark, it's a lot more threatening, it is the work of people who are prepared to try and create something at basically any cost. I mean, allying with demons and spirits in the warp, invoking the power of the Pantheon in an attempt to get your technology working, is all stuff that the Adeptus Mechanicus would obviously have a massive issue with. It introduces an unstable element to everything you do. Things like demon engines and servitors and all of the stuff that the Adeptus Mechanicus does with relatively safe technology, the Dark Mechanicus just throw that out the window, basically. It's whatever needs to be done to achieve will be done to achieve. For the tabletop, that could translate into some really interesting differences. I mean, I've seen people who, have talked about this and kind of said, well, it would just be the same as the Adeptus Mechanicus. There wouldn't really need to be any particular difference because the Dark Mechanicus just does similar things. Similarly, yeah, but the differences are so extreme that it could be very easily represented on the tabletop, just how extreme those differences are. I mean, the Dark Mechanicus, when it comes to things like let's say the equivalent of the Onager Dune Crawlers, the Dark Mechanicus may well have a completely different attitude to creating that type of vehicle. You might end up seeing something that is so much more twisted and so much more chaos infected just in its appearance, let alone its function. The weapons could be more interesting. There could be more in the way of experimental weaponry from the Dark Mechanicus. It would give an opportunity for creating vehicles that are distinctly new. One of the things that is very core to the Adeptus Mechanicus is essentially that new is bad. The stuff that is made is stuff that's always been made. There's very little in the way of exploring new technology or exploring ways to improve technology. I mean, Cole is seen as a radical because he is attempting to make things better. That tells you a lot about the way the Mechanicus actually functions at the point that we are at in 40k. That attempting to improve technology could be seen as borderline heretical, if not completely heretical. That suggests a incredibly stagnant view of technology, of progress. In fact, not even of progress. There is no desire to make progress. There is a desire to stay with what we have because that is what the Omnitia has given us, essentially. The Dark Mechanicus do not subscribe to that in any way, shape or form. They are not interested in just keeping up with what they've done before. They are not interested with only making things that they have made before. That, if they find an STC, that is the only way that they will create something new. They are about experimentation. They are about using the various parts and the various materials available to them to create new things. So you end up with things like demon engines, with defilers, with things like the Decimator. There's all kinds of stuff that could be put into a Dark Mechanicus codex that would just be too out there and too genuinely heretical for the Adeptus Mechanicus to even consider. A heavy reliance on things like demon engines, like Skitarii equivalents that are enhanced, but not just mechanically, but also enhanced in terms of things like strength and speed augmented by experimentation with demonic forces, with alien DNA, with all kinds of things. There is a definite aspect to the Dark Mechanicus that you can't replicate by just having a Adeptus Mechanicus army and going, but they're dark. There is a whole attitude, a whole culture difference between the two, a whole difference of approach between the two, that means that really the only way to properly represent the Dark Mechanicus on the tabletop, I think, is to have a Dark Mechanicus codex. I've seen people do it with, Chaos Space Marines. I've seen kind of reskinned Chaos Space Marine armies that are actually Dark Mechanicus armies, but even then, the rules don't I don't think properly reflect what the Dark Mechanicus would do, how the Dark Mechanicus would function. They are so removed from what they once were that even things like the tactics of the Dark Mechanicus would be different to the Adeptus Mechanicus. The way they wage war, the approach they take to battle, is not going to be the same because they don't have the same materials, they don't have the same forces. They instead have gone their own twisted route. They've created their own chaos-infused path that really is properly underrepresented and has so much potential for interesting and different kind of rules on the tabletop to what we currently have. It is a similar thing with Traitor Guard, which we will cover in another video. But if we did see a codex for Dark Mechanicus, something that I'd really like to see out of it would be crossover between the Chaos Space Marine Codex and the Dark Mechanicus Codex, which you might think, hang on, wait a minute, why would you have crossover? Things like the Mauler Fiend, like the Hellbrute, like the I've forgotten the name of it now, the Helldrake, the Defiler. These are works of the Dark Mechanicus. These are vehicles and demonic entities fused together through the experimentation of completely mental tech priests. Some sort of crossover would be nice, but there would also be the opportunity to expand on that sort of range. Like, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to see a Forge Fiend or a Mauler Fiend in a Dark Mechanicus army. And I would argue the same for the Defiler. Probably the Helldrake as well. They could be crossover with that, but in terms of creating their own vehicles, you could make a Dunecrawler equivalent that would be, almost completely different in appearance. Maybe not in function, but functionally a focus, say, on heavier armour but shorter range weapons could be a good compromise to differentiate them, and would give the opportunity of showing just how kind of far the Dark Mechanicus has strayed in terms of tactics. Things like troops, slightly hardier troops, for instance, with maybe weapons that aren't quite as good, would again show a slight difference in kind of operational capacity, or at least the way that they wage war. Actually having a flyer would be nice. There's just so much that can be done in terms of not just reskinning but tweaking to show the contrast between the side of the Mechanicum that stayed loyal and the side that went off this kind of weird twisting path of experimentation and demonic infusion and actually attempting to create brand new technology, something that the Imperium and the Mechanicus are completely against. The Dark Mechanicus are an interesting faction. They're an interesting side to the universe that do deserve more in the way of story. I think it's something that needs to be expanded on as a whole, and a full-on tabletop army of it would be, I think, sufficiently different from anything else that we currently have that you could create some really interesting things out of it. Of course, the potential for things like kit bashing and creating your own force is through the roof, because really the Dark Mechanicus, what one tech priest does, another tech priest might not do, or they might do but in a similar way but not quite the same. The end goal might be similar, but the routes to get there could be completely different. You could have things that are more demon than vehicle, or more vehicle than demon, and anywhere in between. There is a good amount of stuff in there that you could create something that is truly unique to you without much effort, and it would also really fit what the Dark Mechanicus are about. Whether we'll ever see a Dark Mechanicus codex, either through Games Workshop or Forge World, is another matter entirely. I have no idea whether that's on the cards, whether that's something that could happen, but it'd be really interesting if it did, just because of the differences between the two, and because, like Traitor Guard, they are a significant presence in the universe, but not so much in the lore, and completely missing from the tabletop itself, which, to be honest, the best way to expand on a faction is to have a tabletop army for them. Whether it's feasible or not, I don't know, but it would be nice to see, and it's nice to think about what could come from that. So I guess the question today is, what would you expect to see from a Dark Mechanicus codex? Do you think there's enough material for what they do to put into a codex? And what is the most interesting bit of Dark Mechanicus lore that you know of? Share it in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, video, Patreon, subscribe, all of that shit. There is a referral link in the description for Element Games if you're buying anything Age of Sigmar or 40k related. If you buy it through that link, any revenue gained through that affiliate link will be donated to charity at the end of the month, and the month is October 2018. So if you do want to buy something, buy it through that, and you'll be contributing to charity at the same time. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.